Okay, everybody, welcome to the Dallas FMPUG meeting. I'm Taylor Sharpe. Myself and Greg are the chapter co-coordinators. Greg Price, he's on here too. We're glad to have you for another of our monthly user group meetings. So we're going to kick things off here. I guess we'll start off with announcements. I will say next month I'm going to do a presentation on FileMaker server installations and stuff and all, but after that we don't have anything scheduled. So we're looking for presenters for after that. So if you're available and have something good to share with us, get with Greg or me, and we would love to get you on the schedule. So. Okay, again, I can say Claris doesn't have a developers conference announced yet, so I don't know if that's anything will happen this year, but I got to spend my budget money on something, so I may actually go off to the Berlin thing in June if we don't have an Engage. So, and also there's Pause on Error probably next October or something. So if you're thinking what to put your training money to, those are some ideas, assuming Claris doesn't give us a conference, but hopefully they will. You never know. They could maybe do something late in the year, but we will see. Those are the options for right now. But today we're going to have a presentation on, let me start my keynote going here. So you want to start your own business as a FileMaker developer. So this is kind of a presentation that is looking at, well, let's see, I got to get the screen share started just a second. Okay, screen share, there we go. Second try at it. So hopefully you're now seeing the screen. There's our, so you want to start your own business as a FileMaker developer. So this is kind of looking at people, and I'm saying this from a perspective. I had a career where I went a couple of decades working as an employee, and looking over to see the grass is always greener on the other side of being your own business owner versus being an employee. And so this is going to do a lot of looking at if you were to want to jump out on your own and try to be your own business owner or sole proprietor or whatever, to, what all would be involved, particularly as it relates to being a FileMaker developer in the FileMaker realm of things. So we are going to kick through some of these ideas. Now, I'm giving this presentation kind of because I have experience.
Them was the days, Taylor.
Yeah. How about this? They wouldn't, I don't think they would see it, but let's see. Okay. So yes, I worked with the U.S. government for a long time doing environmental stuff. And I always saw the grass being greener on the other side. And I eventually made that jump actually long after I thought I would have, because I will say my grandiose plan when I was in college was get my college degree, go work for an oil company, then go work for a consulting company, and then break off on my own and do my own thing. And of course, where you were in college is very different than where you are now, and life didn't work out the way you originally thought it would. And that's life. So anyway, I will say that in this endeavor that I took, I will say that there's some reasons why I did it. Where I was working for the U.S. government, you can't do outside work that is related to whatever your professional job is. So part of what it was is I was doing environmental work for the government, so I had to figure out how to moonlight, do a business on the side. And IT happened to be very convenient because I was good at it. And what do you know, I knew FileMaker, and I really liked doing FileMaker stuff. So it happened to be very convenient for me to look in the FileMaker realm as a direction of going. Hey, Heather. No problem, no problem. So anyway, that's where I ended up about a decade ago in making the transition that we're going to talk about today. And I have some other people that are here with us. Dennis and Greg have both worked both sides of things and are going to help give some input as we discuss these different topics. But I'm going to try to cover some of the hot topics or the highlighted ones that if you were to think about thinking the grass is greener on the other side and you might want to be your own business owner instead of employee, what all would be involved. And in some ways, this may end up being more of appreciate why you're an employee and, the grass isn't always greener. Others done both. You're right. Sure have. So we're going to do a little talking about these things here. So let me get to the next slide. Next slide is, okay, so assuming you do want to make this type of jump and you were thinking about, I want to go from whatever I am in my, regular employee job to being a full-time FileMaker developer, we're just going to go with some assumptions that, for example, you're proficient in FileMaker already, right? What is proficient? We can all argue about that. There's those who are FileMaker certified, those who have a bunch of experience, those who think they know something when they don't, and those who don't think they know something when they probably know more than most everybody. But, we're going to assume that you're out there. Now, I'm going to also say that if you are wanting to do these things, I will say, anytime you're jumping into be your own business world, you better be a risk taker, because if you don't take risks, you won't get anywhere and you will fail. And if you take risks, you have the opportunity to fail anyway. So that's just part of being a business owner, is you're going to have to take risks and you're going to fail sometimes. The idea is, can you get past more of your failures to get to your successes? So you'll need a financial plan. So if you're poor, just out of college, don't have any money, and you think you're going to jump in and start a business, you better have a rich uncle or someone that wants to invest in you or something, because you certainly will need a financial plan. And I will say my plan, how I did things was, I had another job and I started this moonlighting, and I was able to work up some clients before I jumped into me doing this full time. And that was kind of the plan that worked well for me and might work well for other people. If you happen to be in another job, but you happen to really like FileMaker, it's a good way to transition, do some moonlighting before you transition, build up a few potential clients so that you're not jumping with no clients and suddenly cold calling on day one. Oh, that would be hell. So you need to have a little bit of financial plan. You need to be a leader. So you need to be able to take control, be a task manager. When you're running the business, someone else isn't going to remind you, did you invoice this? Did you start this project? Did you fill out your time cards? Did you do your, all those things? You better be a bit of a leader and a task manager and not a follower. Even if you do things wrong, you better be at least moving in some direction, because if you don't move in some direction, you'll end up nowhere, and then you'll be broke, and life really sucks then. So, okay, moving on. So if you're wanting to be a FileMaker developer, well, you better have some relationships with Claris. They are the owners of the Claris software. If you don't know who Claris is, then you shouldn't be here today anyway. So let's talk about, as a business relationship, what you would want to have with your relationships. And I'm going to go through some of these, but I'm going to also get some input from Greg and Dennis on these. But I will first start off with, you will notice that my typing thing has messed up. We talk about the Claris Painter membership. That's the Claris Partner membership. Sorry about that. But it used to be called FileMaker Partner, Business Partner. And this is where basically it boils down to this, from my perspective, is you mail $500 to Claris. They do have some criteria for you being a partner. So you do have to have been in business for, like, I think a year and a couple of other things. So it's not just a matter of sending money in. But what you get out of it is you're in their partner program to have relationships with them, that they will basically give you certain announcements. They will include you on their list of partners, so that if people are searching for a developer in your area, they might accidentally find you that way. Don't count on that as a major marketing plan, but yes, you will be out there advertised by Claris for it. And it'll let you do other things in relation directly with FileMaker, well, with Claris for your FileMaker work. So certainly if you're going to be a FileMaker developer in the full-time business, you probably want to try to jump on the bandwagon for becoming a partner. Just realize there is, I think, a 1-year waiting list. You have to have been in business for 1 year. So if you're thinking about doing the jump in the future, you know, make a sale or something a year in advance so you can say you were in business for a year, so that when you do make the jump, you don't have to wait a year to get into the program.
That's
so,
one of the things.
Hey, Taylor.
I wish I would have done was join.
Okay.
Have a bigger push just personally to get in and submit my work to, you know, to get into that program.
Yeah,
as
Brian.
far as regrets go, that would be one.
Yeah, Brian was concurring that. Someone else was saying something. Was it Greg?
And that's Mike.
Oh, Mike.
I will say that I did contact them, and because of my experience, they did waive that 1 year. So if you've been doing FileMaker for a while and you're kind of moving from FileMaker into doing your own business doing FileMaker, at least contact them and see if they'll do that. So,
oh,
Hey,
okay.
Taylor.
Yes, Ray.
I want to stick in my 2 cents. Another lower tier way to get started, you got to give it away. And in the early 90s, I actually did start a little company. And I at that time, at least, you could find people that had heard about databases, but they didn't know anybody that did databases. And I really scared up several companies, and I knew very little, but I learned pretty much giving away what I knew, and I made a lot of progress going back to the Apple Core and people like Taylor Sharpe, and amping up my learning curve. And one little story I wanted to tell, I wanted a name for my company. There was an Apple ad. It was a video, a promotional video for Apple. And these guys went out into the market, and they were able, using the Apple, of course, they were able to do a lot more than anybody with graphics. And the way they came up with their logo was a slash mark. So my company became Mr. MAC /K. And I've never been able to find that video again, but I know that's where the idea came from.
Certainly, coming up with a business name and a logo is always one of those first things you, I guess if there's anybody who's an expert on that kind of things, it'd actually be Dennis. Yeah. Dennis, you on?
I'm here.
Yeah, you want to say anything about company names and logos?
Well, yes, I'll tell you from my own experience. Starting out in my business, I was doing graphic design for the promotional products industry. And I had a buddy who got me started with Macintosh, and he introduced me to a fellow in New York who was really an expert at making icons. Really early, and we're talking about 1990, 1989. His name escapes me right now, but I met with him and I told him I needed something black and white because I was going to be doing black and white camera ready artwork. And I needed to be recognizable because I was going into an industry that was like an ocean of logos all over the place. And he came up with something, and I learned enough about Illustrator that I could take his first draft and thank him for his work and finish it on my own. And then when I used to teach at conventions, I would ask people what they thought the cost of a logo should be. And it was amazing how people thought that a logo should cost $15. or $30. And I would use my own as an example, and I'd say, what do you think the price of this logo was? And the fact is that it was $5,000 that I was asked, and I negotiated it with him because I did the finishing work on my own. The challenge related to your topic today, Taylor, is that when you're starting out in business, you don't know how long you're going to stay in business. You don't know how many years it's going to run. If the logo is a good one, it's going to pay back year after year after year, and it's going to be worth every penny you spend on it. Obviously, if your business doesn't succeed, then that's a pity. But it's really a good investment in long-term success because people associate a visual image with you and whoever you are.
I'll second that. I had my logo professionally made as Mike, and I don't regret it at all. I've had a good number of customers and other people comment on it, and I'm just think it's well worth the money.
Yes, it's and keep in mind, if you have a cheesy logo and you're using it, you'll find that suddenly it's 2 years down the road and you start getting embarrassed about it. So is something good to get up front. And if you don't happen to be a graphic artist, don't be afraid to hire a graphic artist to help you do that.
I would say,
that's right.
On a couple of the bullets that you got there. First, on the topic of the logos, when I had my company, which was Osprey Associates, I did my own logo, but I have a background and I had the software, right? And I had an idea what I wanted and I could do that. But I can tell you it wasn't something that I whipped out in $15 worth of time. I probably spent several hours getting it just right.
Changing the logo from time to time is not a good idea either, because once you've made an investment in making it your identity, tweaking it is one thing, but changing it is really a bad idea.
Consider when you're designing a logo, where's it going to be used? Can it be used in a, on whether it be, back in the day, a letterhead, right? Or on an envelope, or, where is it going to be? And so how is it shaped? Is it, there are a lot of things to take into consideration, and that is why you pay someone usually to do that.
Does it look good both in black and white and color?
Exactly. So, but I've done that for other people, so I had no problem doing that for myself. But again, it was not a $15 kind of timeline that I used. But I wanted to comment also on the things you've got on your current slide, the Claris relationships. My whole career in FileMaker, where I was paid to do that specifically, not where I was paid to do something else, and FileMaker was the tool I used, right? I spent a decade doing that before I, set out on my own and started my own company and started doing consulting work and development work as a contractor. But I was able to do that because of the Claris community. So I had invested personally in what at the time was the CSA, the Claris Solutions Alliance, which was $250 a year, which was a pretty big chunk back in 1993, 94. But I joined that on my own because I was continuing to use FileMaker in the business that my husband and I ran, which was a PR firm. And I used it to generate customized press releases and send things to thousands of media around the country every month, And so it basically ran our business. And to support that, I invested in the CSA. But what came with that was, one reason I did it was because it was $250 a year and I always had the current software, because that was part of the deal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So a new version
Stay
came
current.
out, it came with it, right? So that was cheaper for me to do that. So what came with it was the community and the forum, which was much smaller than it is now. But that's really where I learned, I learned 10 years of, I did it myself kind of stuff, but it was when I joined the CSA and had that forum, I didn't contribute for a long time, for years, but I read every word of what everyone else said, and that I learned so much. And then when I went to my first DevCon, I would see these name tags. It was like, oh, you know, I've read you. But it wasn't until the last session of the last day that I actually spoke up and said anything. And then, and that was real exciting, but that's a whole other story I can tell another time. But really my career as an independent developer, which ultimately led me to Harmonic here, where I am now, was because of my involvement with the Claris Forum, the CSA at the time, then FSA, FileMaker Solutions Alliance, because I was being read once I started participating, which I didn't do until I felt confident enough, like until there were enough issues that had been posted by other people where I said, I think I know the answer. And then someone would answer and I'd be like, oh, I was right, you know, until I was consistently right in the answers I thought. Then I started contributing, but it was really because Andy LeCates read my posts in the community that I got my first really big lead from FileMaker directly. And so involvement, if you're starting out on your own, getting your voice out there so that you're recognized can really pay off. It's worth the investment of time.
And that is one thing about the Claris Partners membership thing. They do make referrals, but I will tell you, they don't make a lot of referrals. So,
no, and again, the community was much smaller then. I'm talking about like 99, 2000. So, you know, it was a long ways back, but it did, in my case, it led to a really big lead and then another big lead and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I really owe the last
Taylor,
of my career over to
Taylor, let me piggyback on something that Heather was saying. Before the web, if you had a graphic identity or you know, something to describe your company, you were printing letterheads, envelopes, maybe a brochure, and the only surviving printed item these days is the business card. Back in those days, if you wanted to print your color logo on business cards, you were spending a fortune because printing required color separations and a long run. Whereas these days, because of digital printing presses, whatever you want your logo to look like, you can run in a quantity as small as a couple of hundred with a Vistaprint, for example. So you shouldn't hesitate to work with color, and you can choose all different sizes and shapes and varieties of business cards. They don't have to be standard. But it is important to think about putting your message somehow into people's hands and not rely exclusively on the web. Okay,
but speaking of relying on the web, that is assuming you are going to have a web page. I didn't put it on here, but anyway, that is kind of like if you expect to have a business card having our phone number, you know, nowadays in business, it's kind of expected you have a web page.
Well, the beauty of doing anything digital, whether it's your own web page or whether you're participating in something else, whether it's LinkedIn or, you know, some community forum, is that you can fix your mistakes. So if you decide to call yourself a Claris painter, and then a week later you realize that you meant to say Claris partner, you don't have to spend money to throw anything in the trash and reprint.
True, true, true.
The website is required also for the Claris Partner membership.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Another thing about the Claris Partner membership is that you will also need to get insurance, but I'm not going to cover that yet because we have a whole slide further down on that. Also, so more things on the Claris relations. If you are a partner, that also lets you resell FileMaker software or any of the Claris software. You're not going to get rich doing it, but you are able to resell it then if you want to do that. And so just be aware that comes as a benefit if you would like to directly sell to your customers. The other thing is if you're going to, there's the Claris Solution Bundle Agreement program. So if you're going to think, you know, we'll talk a little bit further down it, but usually when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do as a FileMaker developer, you're going to be either focusing on doing a bunch of general custom work, or the other avenue to go is you have a vertical solution that you have one of something that you're going to sell to a whole bunch of people. I don't know, example would be like a point of sale software or something, or I don't know, CRM or something. And if you are going down the vertical market route, the solution bundle agreement lets you buy a whole lot more licenses, a lot cheaper. Just realize those people are only being licensed to use your FileMaker solution. They can't be doing other FileMaker, things on it. So, but if you're basically looking for a vertical solution, almost where they don't even know they're using FileMaker, that is a great program that saves you a lot of money. But just be aware, if you want to go into that, the entry point is 50 users. So if you want, you better have clients that have at least 50 endpoint users wanting to use it before it's, you even begin to go down that avenue. So if you just got a client with 10 users and you want to do the solution bundle agreement, it ain't gonna work. So, other things on the Claris relations, there's the Claris Marketplace is a good way to get recognized. And the Claris Marketplace is where Claris lets you submit solutions, extensions, plugins, anything that are supports, that's using FileMaker or any of the Claris products, Connect or Studio. But the Claris Marketplace is a good place to get recognized. And I will tell you what I have done in there to be recognized is I've made a number of extensions and little templates and API stuff that I had to make for clients anyway. And I just run them into a little anonymous template and I put it up there, and then it gets me exposure in the marketplace. But it does let you have your name showing up with kind of the biggies, because obviously they're the biggie platinum people, but if you're starting as a one-man shop like me, you're not one of those. So if you want to at least show up in there, that's one way of having your brand show up somewhere that is looked at least by others in the community. So then, of course, Claris Community Online Forum, which Heather was talking about before, is where it's good to go out and have a little bit of exposure. I think I thought when I was first getting on it, it'd be a way of drumming up business. It's really more about getting technical support or helping out other people. So don't think of that as really your marketing avenue, but it is a good way to get technical support, because you'll be amazed if you're thinking about doing something one way, but you're not sure about it. Sometimes just throwing out an idea, other people will throw out alternative suggestions and stuff. It's very useful for it.
I mean, they're very giving with their time. And I learned back when it was called TechNet was when I jumped in. And I was a fledgling, FileMaker developer in the very early 2000s. And I got a lot of help. That was around when the PHP SDK came out for the web stuff, and I jumped into that and didn't know what I was doing. I got a lot of help from a handful of names that I still remember. Their usernames from the old days. But a lot of people are very giving with their time. I tried to pay a lot of that back, a handful of years ago, and made a lot of friends virtually. A few in person that I've later met, but it's a good place to go for sure.
Well, and thing to remember is if you're jumping out on your own, this is, what we're looking here.
Repeat the question.
The question is, if you're jumping out on your own, how do you get tech support for yourself? So this is the Claris community is a place for you to get support for yourself, because when you're a one-man shop, I don't have people to turn left and right would say, what would you do, or can you help me with this? So if you are a one-man shop, the things like the community forum is a great place to get some online support of peers that are FileMaker developers out there. And I've got some really good advice. I got a few bad advice too, but most of it is actually really good. So it's not like it was in the TechNet days. In the TechNet days, it was a little more social. I kind of miss that, but It's much more just support oriented now, but it is what it is.
And if timing works out, the that DevCon/Engage is also a good option because they have, I think, throughout most of the day, they have a support desk that's staffed by a whole variety of people, and most of them have been really good at just, you know, if you see a guy that looks like me, don't ask him, but ask anybody else.
Claris used to have a product that they called Priority Annual Support. As I recall, it was in the neighborhood of $800 a year. I haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't paid for it in a long time because I never found that there really was any priority to it. But it appealed to me when I fit the description that Taylor was just describing about being on your own and wanting to be able to get good support quickly.
A while back, they announced something for the partners that I haven't heard anything about since. They said they were going to have like special support for us, like place we can call for support. Did I just miss that?
It sounds familiar to me, Michael, but I haven't seen or heard anything about it since.
They frequently talk about support. One thing, just my personal experience is if you phone the FileMaker support helpline, it is great for how do you get things installed and problems with getting up and going. It is not very good on I'm having problems with this script or whatever. The support forum is primarily based at helping you install, set up, and get going. And if you want more than that, you might as well just go over to the forum, the Claris community online forum. Phoning the support help desk isn't aimed at helping that way. So, okay, last thing I'll mention on here is the ETS program. And I'll be honest with you, I was arguing with some of you last night what ETS stands for: Early Testing Service, or external testing service, or
it's early testing something.
Early testing service, software, something. Anyway, did someone know? System? Anyway, I don't know. We were I kept going to the ETS webpage and trying to find out. It doesn't say on it. I even went back to my original agreement I got from them, and it just says ETS at the top.
Symposium, maybe.
Anyway, I just chuckled because it's silly. I can't remember it. But what that is if you're willing to do beta testing for FileMaker or for Claris, they will give you advanced releases of software. Now, it's a quid pro quo. So if you're just wanting to get advanced release of the software and you don't give any input or feedback, then they're going to dump you. And I will say they haven't done that dump in a long time, but they're actually doing it right now for the ETS 20.
Yes, they are.
So if you were on 19 and you haven't gotten an invite to the 20, you were on the dump list, and you need to go back and beg mercies and whatever that you will do to Rick Kalman and Robert Horsley and any of the product development team to say you really will start contributing, or whatever the miscommunication was, because they are getting a lot pickier on who's on the ETS program. And the real reason is because they are doing it for the testing things out. And it means that you're taking time away from other things for you to do some testing, give some feedback, and say, this works, this doesn't work, or, report bugs. And
the issue I ran into with that for a while anyway, and I couldn't even tell you which versions now, but what they want is for you to report bugs. But if you are actively testing and you don't come across any bugs, then they still think you're not doing anything, because they really only want you to report bugs. They don't want you to say, hey, I did this and it worked like expected. So
yeah,
but if you report bugs, you can't be under the illusion that the bug you report is going to result in that bug being addressed in the version that you're experimenting with.
Right, and that's a whole
Because
we could go down.
and sometimes they'll just tell you that's a feature in expected behavior, and you'll be like, what? But anyway, it's a program that you can get on. It is a way of getting kind of in with some of the more advanced people, but it is certainly something that you have to kind of earn your way onto. And but you know, if you are going to be a full-time developer and trying to get your name out there, it is a way of contributing if you can get them to okay you to be on it. But it's obviously getting a little harder to be on than it was in the past. So anyway, and be aware that when you're on it, you're all under non-disclosure. So you see these new features, but you can't come to, you know, this, you know, user group and talk about those new features. So it's, you know, you get to see features, but you can't say anything about them. So anyway. Okay, moving on. Next slide. Legal. Obviously, one of the things you got to figure out when you're going to do something is how you're going to legal organize. And so there's, you know, there's be a sole proprietor. That's just basically your name with the doing business as. You can do a LLC, limited liability company, which is kind of a pass through. You can do an S Corp or C Corp, you know, or various types of partnerships. So I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm probably going to avoid that. I will tell you, I did go to a lawyer when I organized, and I had a lawyer tell me what I needed best for my situation was getting an LLC, at least here in Texas. And so that's what I did. But I would certainly seek out at least some legal advice on forming that and what you need to do on it.
The advantage of an LLC versus a sole proprietorship is that if you get sued by one of your clients, if you're a sole proprietorship, then your everything that you own, your house, everything else is on the line. If you're an LLC, you handle your income taxes as if it's a sole proprietorship, but when it comes time to do the, if you get sued, then the corporation takes the hit, and if the corporation doesn't have any assets, then they have nothing to collect from. So it's a very huge safeguard. And along with that, you might want to consider if you register, I don't know how it works in Texas. In Arizona, you register your company and say, this is the name I'm going to be operating under, and they lock that name into your business so that nobody else can use it within that state.
That's the doing business as.
Yeah.
So yes,
it's pretty common.
Want to claim you're doing business as. I will say one thing also about the LLC, while I will say talk to your lawyer about it, is just before, because you form an LLC, if you still act like a sole proprietor, they can pierce the veil of the corporate veil, and they can still sue your butt off. So if you're going to become an LLC, talk to the lawyer about the things you have to do, like annual meeting and keeping the minutes and keeping those things recorded. You know, you need to have separate bank accounts and, you know, other things that go along with that. You know, you need to do, or that LLC protection won't protect you. But if you do it right, it certainly is an additional protection out there. And you certainly don't want to put any of your other personal assets on the line for a business, because your likelihood of failing as a business is much higher than, you know, your need for a home. So, you're going to also need to come up with business contracts. Usually most of us start out in this program with a handshake and an oral deal. And at some point you'll get burned because, you know, Heather, let's do this deal. And you say, sure, let's do B. And I said, I heard A. And then we get next month and we don't agree. And, you know, and so there's like, well, we need to put this in writing. So obviously contracts vary state by state. So there's some standard work for hire contracts out there that you can use. You can get a lawyer to help you out with it. LegalZoom and things like that can help you get a standard document together, but you need to probably have some type of contract agreement with your clients on how you're going to do things. And you're going to also have to decide such things here, whether or not you're going to do hourly work or project work. And so here's where I argue with James about which is the best way to do things. He's laughing at me over here because he does project work and I do hourly work. But, those are things you got to work out with your client on how you're going to do things. We talked a little bit before about custom versus vertical solutions. So, are you going to be just doing custom projects for various businesses? Or are you trying to sell one or two vertical solutions that are the same to a whole bunch of different clients? Then in your contract, you're going to have to clarify, do you own the intellectual property rights of the database? For example, the schema, the scripting calculations, or do you own that? Who owns the database? You will always, whatever the relationship is, the data in the database will always be owned by the company, but depending on your contract, depends on whether or not you own any of that database or not. Generally, the way I do things is I have them in the contract agree that I own the IP so that I can reuse scripts and other client solutions, but the database and obviously the data in it are very clarified in my contracts that the company owns them, and that's generally what I think most companies want. But that all depends on what you agree in your contract. So you need to work those out down to the last thing being remedies. If you don't agree, are you going to have to sue over it? I will tell you one warning though, is if you think just because you're a developer and you can lock everybody out, that's a good remedy for your contract, be aware you'll get your butt sued off and lose every time if that's what you do, because keeping people from getting to their data, if nothing else, is something that you'll almost always lose on, even if you're a developer and, claim you own the database. So, just FYI, it's one of the big temptations I think all of us developers have had. Well, screw you, I'm just going to cut you off of your database, and you
Taylor,
lose on that. Dennis.
Taylor, two comments I want to suggestions make about contracts. One is be aware that if you're doing business with somebody who is new to FileMaker, or even somebody who's worked with it for a while but on their own doesn't really understand it. I find it has been really helpful to me to create a glossary, which is an attachment to any contract that I give somebody, so that terminology about things like servers and platforms and all the things that we take for granted because it's a jargon language that we all speak, it's helpful to clarify that so it doesn't become the source of misunderstanding. It's something that they can refer to and they know what they're getting into. And the other thing, which kind of is like an appendage to what you say about working on projects versus hourly, is that we all know that there are some things that can be done beyond the terms of a contract, and somebody might need, I don't know, a column moved from left to right, or a font changed, or something really incidental. And you would do that probably as a no charge, courtesy if somebody wants something changed, if it wasn't mentioned within the scope of your contract. But defining the scope is really important so that they understand that just because they get a new idea for something to enhance what you've already done doesn't mean that it's necessarily included in what you quoted you would do. And
I would agree.
Very, very common in FileMaker for people to see the good work that you've done, and it all of a sudden spurs on a whole new idea that may be a really good one, but it wasn't something you discussed in the beginning or contracted about.
Yeah, I think that to clarify something in there is that it's really easy for us when we're estimating or when we're actually sending the contract out to be signed, for us to basically kind of just line item out some high level sort of parts of the project, maybe break it down into like 4 or 5 pieces and say these are this many hours for each one. But it is important on top of that to say in the contract, detailed description attached, and then put as much detail as you can put in that makes sense to put in, where the important thing is that the expectation is not just that you're delivering these parts and pieces, whatever functionality or maybe some, I guess, I can't think of the word, but basically like elements of the project, and to be able to say these elements then include all of these things. And that way, if something's not included, you can always refer back to that. This is just a way for you to make sure that both you and your client are speaking the same language when it comes to what the expectations are. And I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that you give as much of that information to them as possible up front to make sure that you don't run into those problems.
I'll give you a really good example of that, Greg, and it's iPhones. People may have heard about FileMaker's ability to work on their mobile devices. And maybe you even use that as part of your sales pitch to get the business, to tell them how wonderful it is that, you know, the database can be used on the tablets and phones. But your initial contract doesn't get into that because they say they aren't interested in that right now, maybe later. Well, when later comes along and they now want to put it on their phone, for instance, we all know how much work is involved in creating the different layouts and scripts and whatever else is necessary to make it work on the phone. And it might seem to them like it's an enormous amount of additional work.
I would recommend very strongly that you use mock-ups, and because a picture is worth 1,000 words, you know,
wherever possible. Yeah.
You know, if they're all possible, use mock-ups, and also just be, you know, I also usually am very clear in the wording that anything, you know, the interpretation of this is my decision, because I can't be in your head to make to find out what's in there. I only know what's in mine. So if you have any questions or any changes, then please address them with me. I also put in time for customer requested changes and customer requested additions, just a percentage that I add in there. And then I'll tell them, okay, you're getting close to using this up. So
picture's worth 1,000 words, but it's also worth 10,000 phone calls.
Yep. Yeah. Dennis, is there any way that you'd be willing to share that glossary with the rest of us?
Yeah, I could pull it out of a contract, and I can't do it right now while we're together online, but I can do it afterwards. I'll give it to Taylor.
Thanks, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Dennis.
I'd like to share one of the most common pitfalls that I would run into in terms of like scope creep and negotiating what you're doing. And, you know, client asked for A, you gave them A and B, or client asked for B, you gave them A, or you gave them the top half or bottom half, if you gave them a lowercase b, so an uppercase b or whatever. And that would result from conversations with the client, because they always, as you start showing them things, new ideas are spurred, right? And they ask questions. Oh, is it possible to such and such? And of course, my answer is always yes. Of course it's possible. Can you such and such? Yes, I can. Well, what I meant was, yes, technically, logistically, etc. Yes, that is possible. And yes, I'm capable of doing that for you. But they interpret that as, yes, I agree to do that, and within the scope and price that we've already discussed, right? And so then they're upset because I didn't include all these extra features that they thought I agreed to add.
Doing project pricing, if you know someone wants to pay me $175 an hour, technically, if I didn't want to shoot myself in that situation, you just go on forever as long as they want to talk and mess with. Can you move it one to the left, one to the right? Mm-hmm. My favorite way to deal with what Heather just said is that's a great idea. Let's put it on the list. We're getting a minimally viable product, or whatever it's called, minimum viable. That's what we're doing now. Well, I really want this included. Well, that's not included. I love just affirming, yes, here's our list. Let's put that on the list. Is this in the top or bottom? Where does this fit? in your list of extras after we get the thing started.
Yeah, or what do you want to move out of the existing list?
Right.
And substitute for that.
And it gives you an opportunity to negotiate, because they're gonna, no, I really want it. Okay, well, fine, then that's an extra $1,000
Right.
or whatever it is.
And so the reason I mention is because it's an easy trap to fall into.
Very easy.
Because we're excited about the things we can do.
Yes.
They ask about something and they want something and they're thinking about this possibility. It's like, what? Yeah, of course that's possible. And I'm in my mind thinking, and you know,
yeah, you're going to be a client for
I
years.
look forward to you, you know, giving me the money to do that at some point. Right now we're doing this, but I bring it up so that those who are considering this kind of transition keep that in mind, because it took some painful, expensive projects for me to learn how to do what you were discussing, and you know,
well, one thing I
responses properly.
Yeah, one thing I do in my contract is I have them specify who the project manager is, and so that it is very clear what I am being tasked, who's tasking me to do. Because what will happen in a company is the owner says, you know, we need this new module, and then I'll start talking with their accountant person or their marketing person, and they're like, oh yeah, well we need this, and then you go and do that, and then the boss man gets, the decision maker gets the invoice, and everyone's like, well, I didn't approve this, it's like, and so and I will say I've been as bad as anybody else in that, I don't say I haven't done this. I've done where a client said something, I'm like, sure. And I just assumed it would be okay to do it. And it would be, I would give the hours for it. They'd pay for it. Well, I really didn't get permission to do it. And then you're in the awkward position at the end of the month that the owner's like, well, I didn't really okay you doing that. And then it's like,
the other way that same kind of conversation can be interpreted. So I do add the thing and I charge them for it. And they're like, well, yeah, you agreed to do that, but we didn't agree to pay more for it, right?
Yes.
Part of this fixed price thing that we talked about.
Anytime that conversation comes up, I just immediately say, oh, do you have employees that come in and show up for work every day and you don't pay them?
Right.
So my customers pay me when I do work. So, I don't, I mean, that assumption is just ludicrous to me.
Anyway, it certainly means that you need to make sure the communication lines are good. And I like how I do it in the contract is I say you have to specify a specific person as the project manager, and all ideas need to go through that person. And I will do my task management based on that person. And so that way it's real easy for me when people come up with ideas, say, that's a great idea. Tell Joe, he's the project manager. Let's get it on the list. So that's why I'm not saying, I'm saying, yes, it can be done, but you need to, here's my project manager. And I make sure in the companies that everybody knows who the project manager is, which quite often is the decision maker. But the other thing too is realize the decision maker usually is the one that is signing or approving the checks. And employees may have good ideas, but if it's not the same as what the decision maker has, ultimately in this business, you're satisfying the decision maker that signs the checks. You're not working for the employees.
All those little decisions or misunderstandings, or if it gets too granular with suggestions, then that's all that back and forth takes away from development time, which can create another problem, because then you're going to take too long, or you're going to have more hours, and a lot of those hours are going to be spent on trying to clear up misunderstandings. So there's, at the risk of hijacking the discussion, there's hourly, and then there's value pricing, which some people hate, some people love. Sometimes
one is Marxist.
James and I disagree.
In certain situations, a way to, if you and your client or potential client are on the same page and think that way, sometimes there are people that will say, the number is just, in some cases, they just want to know what the number is. They want their problem solved. And they might not be the type of person that wants to go back and forth on little adjustments or misunderstandings. They just want to know that at the end of the day, the result's going to be provided, and they're willing to pay some of them a lot more. And then you can just, this is the number.
Different businesses, right?
Back and forth, or having to keep revalidating your hours and stuff like that. So
businesses work differently. And I will tell you, a lot of businesses will say they have a cash flow situation and they have a budget. And basically they're saying, we need you to keep whatever you're doing in this range. It's, you know, $5,000 a month or whatever it is. And pretty much when you're dealing with the financial people on that things, they pretty much don't care what you do, as long as you stick within that. And if you make sure that you stick within that, and then when you get to a thing that you would be going over, you make sure you schedule that for next month. Don't tell them no, but you know that, you know, stick within your limits. So, okay, on to the next thing, banking, cash flow a little bit is something that you have to keep track of. We're so used to thinking of getting paid instantly. In the business world, you almost never are paid instantly. You might get some upfront money, but you're never finally paid until usually 30, 60 days afterwards. You know, the bigger the client, the slower they seem to pay. It just seems to be how life is. So you certainly need to make sure you have some cash flow cush built into taking care of things. You need to also consider your credit you're going to give to customers. So for example, you know, if you're going to give someone net 30, that they've actually earned that, if they aren't paying you in net 30, at some point you need to pull the credit back and say, that means you need to pay ahead. You know, you pay for so many hours for next month and I will give you those hours afterwards. But you have to be a little bit sometimes hard-nosed with certain clients to say, you know, if you're giving them net 30, you're in essence extending credit. And likewise, you can take that back and they have to pay up front, but you need to make sure those things are communicated up front. And it also rolls into collections. Everybody hates that, but if you're a small business owner, you have to handle collections. That means sending reminders. That means sometimes having to argue about things, and you know, it's unpleasant all around, but every small business owner ends up having to deal with collections. It's just part of being not an employee. So, so if you just can't stand collections, don't jump out and start your own business. Or hire someone to hire Guido to do it for you. So anyway, things to be thinking about. Also, if you are an LLC or anything other than sole proprietor, they'll almost always tell you you have to have separate business banking accounts. So don't commingle your personal and your business account. Make sure those are kept separately. I keep separate business and personal credit cards. All of these things are highly recommended, because as soon as you start combining them, those raise red flags on the accounting end of things, particularly when it comes to taxes and things.
Yep.
Insurance. Woohoo! Well, if you want to become a Claris partner, you are required to have $1 million of general business liability insurance. General business liability insurance, basically for a FileMaker developer, does squat and is a waste of money. It might be a protection for Apple a little bit down the road for having the partnership with us. But primarily what it covers in small businesses are slip and falls. Of course, you chuckle about that, but I actually did have a client come in, sit down in a chair, throw his back out, and the Dallas Fire Department had to haul him out. On top of that, he was a lawyer. I was just worried the whole time. This is getting ugly, but at least I knew I had a general business liability insurance. But I will tell you that almost always will never cover the real issue that a FileMaker developer is going to have, which is going to be about such things as, I wrote this code, it screwed up your business and you lost a lot of money because my code was bad. Well, professional liability insurance is going to cover that end of things, not general business liability. So if you're just out shopping for insurance, you're going to probably need both of those. So just when you're going to do, if in the FileMaker development type business or software development, you really will need both of those. And so FYI, I carry, it costs me, I think I'm somewhere around $1,200, $1,100 for both of them a year. I don't know what other people are getting, but just FYI, as a small business owner, that's about what it costs me. So other thing too is if you're running your own business, you got to deal with your own health insurance. One thing that businesses can offer health insurance. And so one thing you can do, or at least my accountant says, is you can have the business pay for the health insurance, and it's better in the way he does things on his accounting and the tax things for that to do it. So I have my health insurance paid for by the business. Also make sure that along with you have to also pay yourself a salary. I assume you didn't know that. You don't just draw from your money when you want to. If you do that, you get into trouble with various tax things. So you want to make sure you're paying yourself a salary regularly on the first 15th or first of the month. And then every once in a while, you can give yourself a bonus if things are going well or something, but make sure that there's a salary going. There's the accounting guys clearly want to see that when it comes to taxes.
I want to throw in real quick, for those who have never been an employer, when you become your own employer, your taxes go up. You have to pay both sides of employment tax. If you're an employee, your employer pays 8% tax on your income that you have no idea about. So if you're like, oh, look, I make $100,000 here, I can go get this client for $100,000, it'll be square. Nope, you just lost $8,000. So be very familiar with the tax implications of all of this stuff.
Yeah, hiring employees is certainly a step up. If you're just like me, I've kept thinking.
No, I'm saying you have to pay both self-employment tax is extra. So forget about an employee.
Basically, it's your Social Security tax. The portion of your Social Security amount that's deducted, it doubles.
Yes.
Because you're paying
it goes to like,
no,
it goes to like 12%, I think.
16.
Is that what it is? Anyway, I just see it on my thing.
People pay more. Income tax is not the problem. It's employment Social Security tax. And people don't know it because half of it's hidden until you're self-employed.
And then you get to see it, and then you go, "Oh my gosh!"
Depending on what state you're in, because my business was in North Carolina, so I don't know what the rules and things are in Texas. But you also have disability insurance is the same thing, where employer pays part and the employee pays part for that. And so when you become self-employed, you're paying both halves.
Yep. Well, so and if your other states, you also probably have a state income tax. Texas doesn't have one conveniently, but I'm trying to, I'm close enough. I'm, 7 or 8 years to retirement. So my goal is I've got plenty of retirement money. So my goal is not to grow. So trying to avoid as much of that as possible. Right. I'm just trying to, I'm trying not to, other than, the business paying me, I don't want to hire any employees because I'm trying to stay out of that. Just be aware your life gets more complicated when you hire employees. I will tell you that what I do usually is I have 1099 people when I need to sub out some work, but you also have to play by the rules of 1099. You have to make sure that you're treating them as a contractor and not as an employee, or you get in trouble on that too. So anyway, life's good and exciting on those things. But
you can choose to pay your own unemployment insurance. So if you fire yourself, you theoretically can get unemployment. Not recommended, but you can do that.
Interesting. Texas law. What do you know? Okay. Training. If you are going to be in a business, you do need to get some training as part of your budget. You need to budget for that. There's in-person training. There's online training. This is a training thing, the user group. So that's a free one. So that's easy. But there are publications, there's subscriptions. But I will tell you the best training still I find always is the in-person training. The best one always to me is the Engage Developer or DevCon, what it used to be called, is the best thing to go to because the network in there is just, you meet the best people from all over the world. And I'm really hoping Claris will reinstate that. We're still on pandemic hiatus. I hope they'll get that going, but it is really, I find it is one of the most useful things that I do, not so much in what I learn, but in what I get to network with other people in the profession at it. So there are smaller conferences that are not run specifically by Claris, such as, the Pause on Air. And, I do recommend those. Those are a whole lot smaller. The big conference usually has about 1,500 people in it. So it's actually a really big conference. So I just, Claris, please do a conference, take my money, please. But anyway, just remember to budget for that in your planning of running your own business. Marketing and general business stuff. You'll probably need a business plan, particularly for anybody if they're an investor, which you're often probably your own investor. So hopefully you've saved up some money. You need a web page. We already talked about that. Being active in the community, Claris Marketplace, business relations. You need to, if you're going to run your own business, one of the biggest things you need to do is you need to focus on clients that pay you money, and you need to know not to focus on clients that they may make a lot of noise and may try to contact you a lot, but they aren't your big payers. It's just, you have to know how to know where your money stream is and prioritize the good clients and try to slowly get rid of the bad clients. We all have the problem clients. And one of the most successful things is if you're able to slowly wean off, the pain in the butt clients and spend time developing and cultivating those clients that are willing to pay you regularly for excellent work.
So I think one of the questions you have to ask yourself related to what you're talking about now is, how much of an investment do you want to make in being a mentor instead of the contractor and developer, right? Because if you're spending time with a client that they're not paying for, that's really what you're doing. And I mean, it's something you can find yourself doing when you start off, because it ties, in my mind, it ties back to that whole community connection. And you can spend a lot of time helping other people and then find that that translates to you spend a lot of time helping your clients, being helpful and not getting paid for being helpful.
Yep.
That's why I do hourly work. And I know a lot of the developers don't like to do this, but I focus on clients in my area that I can go to, and I try to work at my clients. And I will tell you, there's some benefits of actually being with the clients, even if they've stuck you off in a closet somewhere. You have direct contact with them on what's happening. Such things as, if I put X number of hours in and they saw me at their place at the end of the month, they never argue about that. If I just put X number of hours and they never saw me all month, those are almost always the times you get questioned, did you really put those hours in? I also, just because the way I personally work, I do a lot better in person-to-person development. And so I try to work as much as I can at my clients. I know a lot of other people don't like doing that, but I will say, since I do prefer to work hourly, working at clients avoids a lot of the issues of, what were you doing then? And well, if you can look on your security camera, I was sitting over in the corner there. So, I was there, type thing works well, at least if you're doing the type of work I am. I know for you project type workers, you kind of want to get something done, and it doesn't matter how many hours you do it. If you take too many or too few or whatever, it's none of the client's business how many hours you take or don't take. But this is just, you have to figure out how your way of doing business is and foster that. So, okay, accounting. If you don't know, you obviously have to do.
Oh, hey Taylor, before we move on to that, I think one of the things for marketing I wanted to bring up was, and a lot of people in the community do this, is having some kind of social media presence, be that either you can have a blog, you can have a podcast, YouTube channel, things like that, all extremely very helpful, not only in getting you sort of exposure in the community, but also a lot of sort of do-it-yourselfers out there who are maybe on sort of the knife edge of, do I continue doing this myself or do I hire somebody to do it? They're going to go out there, they'll look for advice, and they find your video, your podcast, and they will, you know, they will have a much better chance of calling you, getting in contact with you because of things like that.
One thing I want to recommend also is even if you know how to do HTML and CSS and JavaScript and all that stuff, the amount of time that it's going to take for you to roll your own website for the kind of marketing site you're going to be doing is going to far outweigh the benefit, in my personal opinion. And so I would go with like WordPress or some other content management system, and just let somebody else do the framework and maintenance and all that stuff. And all I do is provide content, and it makes life ever so much simpler.
I want to put a question out to you guys about that, and particularly the SEO aspect of any web page. I used to get phone calls from the Google team trying to sell me on their AdWords. And it got to be an annoying kind of a challenge to suggest to them that I can't think of a keyword that would attract people to what it is that we do. If you put up the word database, you know, some people think that their Excel file is a database. And very seldom, I think, do people go searching online for a database developer, because they don't know that the development of a database is the solution to whatever their problem is. So if somebody is disorganized or over their head with productivity issues, I don't know what the keyword is that would bring them to us. It isn't as if we're selling a product. You know, if my product was anti-glare sunglasses, that would be my keyword, because people know that they're looking for anti-glare sunglasses. But because the FileMaker database or solution or app or whatever we call it is the answer to a particular problem, and no two are alike, I've always been stuck at trying to come up with the keywords for search engine optimization.
I agree. And if you use database to the IT professionals, database is a database administrator, which is only one little portion of what we do. So
right.
that doesn't work.
From my own personal experience, SEO is an art form in and of itself. And this is one where
Dark art.
Yeah, because Google is constantly playing with their algorithm. And so to really get the maximum benefit out of SEO, it really benefits you to, well, one, you can get SEO plugins for WordPress, for example, and that will help in a great deal. But there are consultancies that specialize in that, and they have their finger on the pulse of the latest rev from of whatever the algorithm is at Google, and so on and so forth. And they're going to be able to speak into those questions, some suggestions that are going to be probably the most helpful of you know, the sources that you could possibly look to. And if you're depending on the web to drive your business, SEO consultancy money is money well spent.
And you think that those consultants would be able to invent the kind of keywords that would define what it is that we do?
They'll ask you a bunch of questions about your business. And they'll ask you, what do you do and how do you do it? And what are your tools and so on and so forth. And they will give you a list of keywords that they suggest and ask you to validate them. But in terms of the SEO stuff that comes in as spam in your mailbox are not the people you want to be dealing with. And because there's a lot of charlatans out there that claim they'll, make you the top thing in Google's search rankings. And yeah, right. Yeah, basically all they know about SEO is how to spell it. So, find a reputable SEO consultancy is my first, if you're going to go that route, and make sure that they have a track record and they have some clientele that you can call and references you can check and things like that. Because people claiming to be SEO consultants are they're like rabbits, they multiply.
Yep, that's true.
It's not really targeted to you, but just in general for people, you need to define what you do. I mean, for me, FileMaker is a tool that I use for the customer, but business process optimization probably covers a lot of what a lot of us do for our customers. And there's other things, as far as, but focus on the end result of what is happening, not the tool that we're using to get there. That would be my recommendation if you're trying to define what you do and how to.
That's a good point, Michael. And it's kind of a segue into, I've never thought of myself as a FileMaker developer. If somebody asks me what I do, consulting is what I do. And it happens, as you just said, that FileMaker may be the tool that I used to implement a consulting solution for whatever is the issue that is persistent at that client that would bring them to me.
There we go. Thank you, Dennis. Okay. Oh, how did that go away? Accounting is our last end of things, so we'll go through this real quick, but you'll need QuickBooks or you can, of course, spin your own accounting system, but obviously your business is going to require that. Your tax person is going to require that. I recommend that you have to, reconcile your books at least monthly and your bank accounts. That's just one of those things you got to do. It's a pain in the butt. Just plan on doing that as a part of your regular schedule. You have to send out invoices and handle collections. Those are just duties a business owner has to do, and they are the less glamorous end of things that you got to do. Pay yourself regularly, and also pay your taxes. You generally, IRS expects quarterly payments. So have those all worked out with your accountant. You probably need to get a CPA or an accountant to help you out. I use a CPA that does my taxes and general accounting review. Need to have a budget. So any business that's going to do well has got to kind of have a plan for what you're spending. Of course, a lot of that's going to depend on how much money comes in, but you still need to be planning for your expenses from all your software, your hardware, advertising, training, and then professional expenses. So anyway, that kind of wraps up, if you want to jump out and be a FileMaker developer and in so doing be a, run your own business, these are some things that you need to do. If you're an excellent FileMaker developer and you want to spend most of your time just FileMaker developing and you don't want to deal with accounting and marketing and taxes, being an employee is a good way to go. So just keep in mind that this is not an endorsement that any or even most people would want to start their own business. It is daunting. It is a lot of risk involved, and much more people go broke being a business owner than being an employee. So.
But most people who go broke being business owners have a whole lot more in the way of expenses than somebody who's just a straight up software developer like we are. I mean, everybody pretty much is already going to have a computer, right? So it's pretty much all you need. And then to just kind of keep up incrementally from there.
Unlike starting a store or something, you don't have to build up a bunch of inventory. So,
yeah, you don't have to keep that stuff as liability either. Yeah.
So it makes it an easy type of business to start compared to a lot of others. So
yeah, and it makes it simpler to operate as well. Certainly a lot less stress than somebody who has to go ahead and account for things like inventory at the end of the month or year, what have you. I did want to bring up one thing about the tax situation, and I know that this kind of goes back to setting up your company as well as the tax that you were just talking about right now. But when you are working as a Schedule C, the idea is, let's say for instance with your company this year you do $100,000 in sales and you have $25,000 in expenses of whatever kind, office, all your utilities for your home office, things of that nature. So you're getting taxed on that $75,000 and you end up paying both your income tax and your self-employment income tax, which is the employer side of it, right? So that's pretty much a Schedule C is going to be is anybody who's either running why did I completely lose it? An LLC. Anybody who's running an LLC is going to be kind of doing it that way unless they're filing as something different. Or if you're just like a freelancer, same concept, right? But if you're running an LLC but filing as an S Corp, there is an advantage to that in this. It's not gonna be a huge advantage, but it's gonna be a little bit. So let's say, for instance, as an LLC, you have to pay yourself a salary, right? So you make a same scenario. You have $100,000 in sales, $25,000 in expenses. You pay yourself a salary of $50,000, which is generally what the IRS kind of has very nebulous rules on what is considered a reasonable salary, but they tell you have to pay yourself a reasonable salary. I think somewhere around half of what you expect to be getting in sales is a reasonable salary, and I think it generally works. So when you go ahead and do that $50,000, then you're paying your employer taxes because that's payroll now, and you're also getting your taxes, your income taxes taken out of that as well. So you're paying the same tax on that $50,000. The other $25,000 that's left at the end of the year when you file your taxes comes out of your company's tax return, your 1120S, as what's called the Schedule K1. And that K1 is going to have $25,000 on it, and you pay simple income tax, the single side of it. So you can actually save some money on your self-employment taxes by doing it that way. It really kind of depends upon, how comfortable you are with paying yourself a salary and keeping up with that as appropriate to the amount of sales that you have, and whether or not you have to sort of reduce that. If you're having a slow year, or if you're having a gangbuster year, do we need to expand that a little bit to make sure that we're paying ourselves a reasonable enough salary that the IRS isn't going to kind of give us the stink eye when it comes to tax time? So something to think about.
I can also make a few remarks for you about independent contractors. It's one thing to be an independent contractor, and it's another thing to engage with people and have them be independent contractors working for you. Any accountant will guide you as to whether or not that person, whether it's yourself or somebody else, satisfies the requirements to be an independent contractor. And I say this from years of experience working on the government relations committee of a trade association, where probably 80% of the trade behaved as if they were independent contractors, and many of them got caught because they didn't meet the requirements. There was something called the safe harbor test, and it probably has changed over the years. It's been a while since I served on that committee, but some of the ones that I remember are if you are providing the person with a workplace. So let's just suppose you open up your own FileMaker business the way we've been discussing today, and then you decide that you want to hire somebody, and you provide that person with a desk and a computer. Providing that workspace will disqualify that person from being an independent contractor. If that person's time is controlled by you rather than by themselves, that's another important part of the safe harbor test. So, just be on the lookout for that. If somebody has other clients, other businesses, if they carry their own business card and they can meet that test of being independent, then you do not have to take withholding taxes out of their paycheck.
Yeah, I think, Dennis, that the second one for sure is still a requirement. Basically, if you are having to work set hours for someone, then you are not a contractor, you're an employee. As far as providing a workspace, I don't think that is any more necessarily a disqualifier, because there are a lot of people who, we need you to come out and work on site. And if you work on site, then you do have a workspace in there that you use. Now, whether or not you have like your own desk with a name tag and things like that may make a difference, but I don't think that just strictly having a place to work on site at a customer's facility is going to disqualify you.
I wasn't thinking about working on site at the customer's facility. I was thinking more like when I lived in Texas and Taylor would have me come over to his place where there was a desk, and it happened that I wasn't doing work for Taylor. I was just palling around for the evening. But if I was in that situation using that desk in his office space, I'm not at the client.
Right.
I think they might have redefined some of the workplace requirements since COVID. So that's definitely something you'd want to talk to an accountant about.
Well, also in the advent of shared workspaces as well has changed things a little as well.
Yeah, COVID may have made changes in that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the IRS has made changes because of COVID.
True. He wants to tell us about that. James?
Contractor, there's so much literature. If you're thinking about being a contractor or hiring a 1099, look up your state's laws. It is hugely complicated. There can be no way to give proper legal advice here. Greg, to your point on LLCs, if you're a single member LLC, or it's like husband-wife owns the LLC, it's a pass-through. You can't separate profit day one from, it's just considered regular income. If you're a 50-50, like say Taylor and I own a company 50-50, then you can jump over the employment taxes. But if you're a single member LLC, you need to be careful. There may be an accountant trick out there, but
okay, well, let's wind things down here. I will certainly just leave it at this. Talk to your CPA or accountant person to get things right, because, where you're not an expert, non-FileMaker things, certainly let's rely on them. Okay.
But also be aware.
You don't want to let that come bite you in the butt later on. It's
especially
another headache that we don't need.
That's right, because if you lose your argument with the IRS, you're going to pay those employee taxes retroactively.
Certainly. Okay, next month we're going to be talking about FileMaker server management. We're going to install FileMaker server, uninstall FileMaker server, install SSLs, do plugins, do various things. So anyway, if you want to figure out FileMaker server management, I think the last time we had one of these was in like 2018. So it's time to do it again, and I'm sure we can come over some fun obstacles. It will be done on a Mac. I don't have an Ubuntu or a Windows server to do it on, but those of you who do, we may talk about those at least. So anyway, come here next month, and we look forward to seeing all of you. And thank you for being here. It's been a great meeting.